Hey guys, Argent here, with a reactionary review of Starship Troopers. No, not the movie, although I suppose I could do one of the movie, but the movie's not really as philosophically deep as the book. I really like the movie actually. It's kind of a good mix of action, camp, and satire, with just enough seriousness sprinkled in. But we're not here to talk about the movie, we're here to talk about the book. Um, so this is largely just going to be talking about the ideas discussed in the book, because the plot is kind of non-existent. Starship Troopers is a novel of ideas. It's not in any real sense a character study or anything to that effect. If you've seen the movie, the book's pretty similar. Basically, we have Juan Rico, who's from Argentina. He's from an extremely wealthy family, and he decides to sign up for federal service. And the book is kind of about him going through training, his flashbacks, an exploration of various political and military themes, and a couple battle scenes. None of which is really that interesting to talk about. I mean, the book's not boring, but it's kind of not interesting for me to just kind of reenact action scenes. Um, they're fairly exciting when you read them, and Starship Troopers did predict a lot of modern technology, and it is one of the most aesthetically important books ever written, because kind of the idea of powered armor more or less originates from Starship Troopers, as does the concept of a space marine. So I'm just going to talk about really the lore of the book because that's what the book's about. That's not just kind of my decision to focus on it. The vast majority of the book is conversations and monologues and flashbacks focusing on um, various political philosophical themes. So the world of Starship Troopers was the product of Robert Heinlein, who is one of the strangest men in history. Um, Robert Heinlein was a science fiction writer who is interesting as he wrote one of the biggest works of degeneracy and cultural Marxism of all time, but also the greatest intellectual defense of fascism of all time. His political ideas are very difficult to classify. The closest I can really say is they're kind of libertarian fascism. They're kind of this strange, socially liberal fascism, etc. Like for instance, he started an organization to try and defend and promote nuclear testing at a time when a lot of people were trying to ban it. He also published Stranger in a Strange Land, which led to the sexual revolution, or was a key force in the sexual revolution. If you haven't read Stranger of a Strange Land, I wouldn't recommend it. It's literally like one of the most degenerate things possible. It's just about a guy from Mars who comes to Earth and has psychic powers, and he just has sex with everything that moves, and he gets like declared the Messiah, or some bullshit like that. I couldn't actually finish the book. I got about like 3/4 of the way through, and I'm just like I couldn't take it anymore. But I digress. So yeah, so Robert Heinlein's a really weird guy, and he's really difficult to kind of classify. I will give him credit though. One thing you can't argue about Robert Heinlein is that he's uncreative. His political beliefs are not just kind of like a boring mainstream left-wing pablum. They're actually very in-depth, interesting, and kind of unique. So Starship Troopers. So the world of Starship Troopers takes place a couple hundred years into the future, where all of humanity is under the leadership of a government called the Terran Federation. The Terran Federation governs Earth and a number of colony worlds. At this point in time, I don't believe individual nations exist anymore, and all are under the Federation government. So to talk about the Federation, we really have to talk about where it came from. Now, Starship Troopers was written during the height of the Cold War, and Robert Heinlein was a staunch anti-communist. Both of his kind of fascist and libertarian views were in direct opposition to communism, so he despised it. So basically, what happened in Starship Troopers is um, the second half of the 20th century saw a massive increase in antisocial behavior. In particular, crime was rampant. Youth were burning and looting throughout cities. There was general economic problems. There was a series of financial collapses caused by um, various governments overspending. The period is referred to in the book as a period of unlimited democracy, in which the people believed that they could vote themselves anything and make it so. Um, Robert Heinlein makes it pretty clear that the downfall of 20th century human civilization was that it was based around the belief that anyone over the age of 18 should be allowed to vote, and that they had no responsibility to the state or to their society. Um, and they didn't have to earn the right to vote. That the ability to choose those in power was just a right given to everybody, regardless of their worth and regardless of what they've done. So what happens is there's a wave of crime. He attributes the wave of crime to psychologists who basically eliminate all forms of punishment for most crimes, and any form of discipline towards children, which we're seeing a lot these days. So a combination of basically the dildification of society, the removal of punishments from crimes, the self-entitled attitude of the public, and governments being completely incapable of controlling their own populations and essentially just giving them whatever they voted for, results in a decline of the West. This decline is taken advantage of by the Chinese hegemony, as it's referred to, and a global war takes place between NATO and Russia on one end, and the Chinese hegemony on the other. The various Western powers lose the war and collapse in upon themselves. Um, it was just too much for the states that were riddled with corruption, incompetence, decadency, and unsustainable debt loads, and virtually all their societies collapse. In the aftermath of the war, a huge number of veterans are repatriated from China where they had been held prisoner. A gang of these veterans in Scotland, seeing the complete breakdown of the society and the rioters and the looters and just the breakdown of law and order, forms a vigilante gang, and they begin to actively use their military skills to put down the riots, to put down the looters, to protect the population. So they start hanging rapers, they start hanging murderers, they start enforcing private property, and they basically start to restore order. Over time, this continues to spread, and more veterans across the Western world begin to form these local militias, and they gradually speaking pull back. They push back all the kind of destruction of the previous generation. Eventually, it appears, and they don't go into too much detail about this, society recovers, and more or less the leadership in most Western countries has become military, not out of a coup, but because the existing democratic order collapsed. There's no real formal point where the military like storms the parliament buildings and shoots the government and declares a junta. It just becomes a de facto military government because uh, the the um, the the old system has just vanished. It's not. People might think that there was a coup or something, but there wasn't. There just wasn't a government anymore, and the surviving veterans founded one. So the surviving veterans viewed. I think they eventually defeated the Chinese hegemony, which I think also collapsed, etc. And the veterans continued to choose more and more leaders, and eventually the world became united under a veteran-led federation, which became known as the Terran Federation. So the Terran, so what the and they have a class that every civilian, sorry, I should say, in the Terran Federation has to take called History and Moral Philosophy, which is attempting to instill patriotism and explain why the Federation functions the way it does. So the determination that was made by the veterans was that the failure of sorry, I forgot something. Um, During the collapse period following the war with the Chinese, A group of Marxist scientists attempted a coup and briefly gained power. That was kind of the thing that eventually broke the camel's back. Sorry for not mentioning that earlier. So basically, their socialist dictatorships rose up in virtually every Western society in the deprivation aftermath of the World War, and these didn't last particularly long, and they attempted to give the public everything, but they also meant the chopping block. So the view was that the failure of all these governments was based on the idea that the people who were put in charge had no loyalty to the state, no loyalty to society, and no sense of anything greater than themselves. The military veterans said their position was you have to be willing to risk yourself and to serve if you are to govern. So the Terran Federation is essentially a democracy, but it's a limited franchise democracy. Um, to qualify to vote, that is to gain citizenship, because like 99% of the, or maybe like 95% of the population are not citizens. They are resident aliens or civilians, if you want to be nicer, but they are not citizens of the Terran Federation. To qualify to vote, you must perform 2 years of federal service. Now, what federal service is kind of varies. If it's a meritocratic society, so obviously, if you are skilled in a particular area, they will put you to work doing it. Like if you're really smart or something, they might make you go and do some medical research. Or if you're good at building things, they'll make you go in and work at building things in like a less developed area of the Federation or something. What it's kind of most famous for and what it focuses on the book is military service. You can pick what part of the military you want to be part of, etc. Um, Although only the elites are sent into the mobile infantry, or the space marines, I guess you could call them, which is what Rico's sent into. So yeah, so basically everybody in the Federation, if they wish, can volunteer for federal service. I believe they're paid a normal-ish salary, not the highest, not the lowest, but like a fair salary. The work though is rather difficult, onerous, and often dangerous. Like you might be given the task of testing survival gear. You might have to participate in medical experiments. You might have to serve in the army, etc. However, everybody is permitted to apply for federal service so long as you are considered competent to take the oath of citizenship. If you are not competent to take the oath of citizenship, that is, you don't understand it, then you cannot have it. But let's say that someone came in and they were paraplegic and they couldn't walk. They would still be, it is their right as a citizen for the government to find them some sort of service to perform. Perhaps they could pilot a ship. Perhaps they could do just something else, logistics or something on a computer or something. Even if you're like blind or something, they would find something for you to do. Um, because it's not really important what you're doing, it's the fact that you're willing to volunteer part of your life and put your life in danger for your beliefs. So the idea is that by basically giving power to all the ambitious people and ensuring that the ambitious people have skin in the game, as it were, you have a society of sheepdogs that watch over the sheep, etc. So citizenship gives you the right to vote. It makes obtaining a couple licenses easier, and it gives you free as much education as you want. Those are the only benefits citizenship gives you. You do not gain citizenship while you are in active service. So if you wish to hold a civilian post, um, you have to be a veteran. That is, you have to do your 2 years of service, be discharged, and only then do you gain citizenship and voting rights. So all public service positions, including like the assistant to like a council member or like someone who works in their office, are only filled by veterans. The idea being that the state and that the people who serve the public have to be people who have proved that they are willing to risk their lives for the public. They have to prove that they're willing to fight for society, that they're willing to risk their life to really achieve something of value. And the idea is that this is preferable to just giving these to whoever can obtain the most votes in a popularity contest. Because ultimately, there's nothing more valuable than your life, and someone who's willing to bet their life or risk their life to serve others is the kind of person you want running your society. And so the society of Starship Troopers more or less seems to function quite well. Crime rates are extremely low as the military doesn't really tolerate much uh, disorder. Taxes are thought to be quite low too. The government seems, aside from providing a couple basic services and uh, and obviously the military and foreign relations, the government doesn't seem to do very much, and so it kind of seems almost like a libertarian state. Uh, it's heavily militarized, and there's a large, powerful army, but other than that, taxes are extremely low, and there's virtually no interference in people's private lives. The society, ironically enough, despite being a military dictatorship, kind of runs on the non-aggression principle. That is, the people are largely left unmolested aside from small tax, relatively comparatively low taxes, so long as they don't violate other people's natural property rights. They don't commit violent crimes or just do anything like that. I think this says there's also a couple restrictions on having children, but by and large, it's a society of very little, of very much personal freedom. Um, there's a lot of I think drug use is legal. Polyamory is not really even frowned upon. It's kind of an interestingly socially liberal society that's under a military dictatorship. Um, there doesn't really seem to be that many social mores aside from this idea of service to a greater good. It doesn't really seem like there's any kind of social welfare, as much as I can tell, or like kind of social engineering projects aside from the promotion of duty to one's state. Part of it though is kind of inequality because uh, the government doesn't expect or want a majority of the population to do federal service. And in fact, if the entire population did federal service, the system would probably collapse because there would be no private economy. The idea is that they want to take a small portion of the society to form the ruling elite. Um, and once again, they are not really an economic elite. And they are not allowed to serve in government posts while they are still in the military. So it's kind of an interesting that there's this separation between military and government, and yet they're kind of integrated in such a fashion that the military will never be a threat to the government, because they're kind of the same thing, but it's not a junta. It's a civilian government made up of ex servicemen. So that's kind of the society of Starship Troopers. I gotta say, it's very interesting. Um, it's you gotta give Heinlein credit. I often complain about people being derivative or uncreative, and that doesn't mean that they hold an idea that, like, it's fine to hold an idea that lots of other people hold. I mean, I'm not even like a rad trad Catholic. I'm just a fairly normal conservative one, and I think it's fine that I hold a position that's kind of just not that unusual or larpy or counter signaling. But I think you have to be able to express it in kind of a unique and interesting way. Like you gotta, for lack of a better term, make an idea your own. Um, and Robert Heinlein is most certainly a very creative uh, guy. I mean, he came up with a completely kind of new governmental system that drew on a lot of different stuff. He kind of made a version of libertarianism that actually kind of works and kind of makes sense. And he does it all in a fairly convincing way. So there's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with presenting, holding ideas that are not particularly unmainstream, but you have to be able to like be a creative thinker and to justify them in kind of your own fashion. My complaint is more just liberals who just regurgitate just lame talking points. Like they're not all like this, and just they're just people who have never had an original idea in their lives. And having an original idea once again doesn't mean you reject something that's established or widely held. It means that you've thought about it critically and you accept that idea not because like somebody told you to or because you're signaling, but because you actually kind of believe in it. Um, so yeah, so that's basically in a nutshell Starship Troopers. I hope I kind of explained it. Um, this is going to be a little shorter than some of the other ones just because there's not really that much to say about the plot because there really isn't a plot. I'd recommend the book. It's a short read. It's a good read. Just lots of interesting stuff. It's really would be a good book for like a reactionary book club or something. If you don't like a libertarian, make them read it. This is Argent Templar signing out.